I can feel it deeply in a special way.
An oldie but a goodie.
I've been given the clicker. Now we're in trouble. Good morning, and thank you, Reverend Gary, for the opportunity to be your substitute teacher for the day. Unfortunately, he's here, so we're not going to get away with a lot of stuff like we would in school, but it's still going to be fun, I promise. So I want to start this off this morning and ask you a question. By virtue of a show of hands, how many people here have ever been told, you can't do that, you can't be that, that's a terrible idea, just flat out no? How many of us? Why, with the number of hands that shot up, you thought I'd say how many people want a $100 bill. It's pretty universal there, so you've got a big hand in the back. So we've all had that no, that negativity forced on us, haven't we? So this is a question where, as Linda had said last week, I want a little call and response. How did it make you feel? Terrible, bad, determined. What did you say, Linda? Oh, nothing? Nothing. Didn't feel very good. What I'm hearing is a lot of negative emotion that went with that response from someone else. And those responses could have been from people who were very influential in our lives. Our parents, our grandparents, favorite teacher, best friend, boss that you dearly loved, coworker. And they helped us deliver a belief system in our own heads, didn't it? Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Now, I like being right. My family will tell you I love being right. But if I'm going to be right, I'd rather err on the side of being right because I can, not being right because I can't. I don't want that limitation forced upon me. And when people tell you, you can't do that, you're not good enough, that's nothing you're ever going to be able to accomplish, doesn't make us feel good. But how much of that seeps into our consciousness and helps develop our belief system about ourselves? How much of that do we actually buy into? That, wow, I guess I won't be able to do that. How much of that really sticks with us for a long time? We let people move into our head rent-free when that happens, and that's not a really good place. And I don't allow rent-free. I charge a hefty sum per month if you want to get in this head. Well, Thomas Troward, very famous author and New Thought teacher, said this about limitations. Belief in limitation is the one and only thing that causes limitation. The belief in the limitation causes the limitation. So when we are told, no, and you can't, we develop that belief system. And as human beings, we really like to assign that responsibility for that belief to someone else. We like to blame somebody else. Well, I'm like that because that's what my mom said. Or I never tried that because Dad said, you'll never be able to do that. Or that boss said, you're never going to be the right fit for that kind of job. That was what their beliefs were. What's in my psyche, what's in my consciousness is my belief. That's what I've put there. And I have to find a way to get past that. I've got to find a way to get past the belief that other people have imposed upon me, because that's not who I am, and I don't let them define me. I can't let those circumstances define me and who I am becoming. And even at my age, I like the idea of saying I am becoming. I think when I stop that process is when I'm taking a dirt nap, right? Because I always want to be moving forward on this path. Always want to be moving forward on this path. Now, when I was a very young child, first of all, I was born into the unholy triad, New York, Irish, Catholic. Wasn't that bad, but that was my family background. And my grandparents on my dad's side were from Ireland. So they're Irish Catholic, which is a step up, right? I was the first girl born in the McNamara family in almost 50 years. So I was born into status. I was the little princess of that family. I only had 2 older brothers at the time. I'm actually the middle of 5, but at that time, 2 older brothers. I was early, I was a little preemie, so I was very tiny as a child. And as a result of all of this, I was in this limitation bubble set forth by my family. Oh, you can't do that because you're the little girl. Oh, you can't do that because you're so tiny. And my first memories in my childhood probably go back to when I was just about 4 years old. My mother will tell you that I was an obstinate, independent child. My wife will tell you that I'm an obstinate, independent woman. That doesn't change much when you go through those years, right? My first sentence as a child was, I do it myself. So everything was going to be, I'll do it the way I'm going to do it. I had these limitations placed on me by everybody around me, but I found ways around it. I had those two older brothers who I idolized, and I thought that they were the cat's meow. They were great. So anything they did, I wanted to do. And I was a great imitator. I learned to tie my shoes, not because somebody sat with me and showed me. I watched them do it over and over again, and I thought, well, I can do that. And I learned to tie my shoes. And as they were reading when they were young, they would, read and they'd put one finger across each word. Those of you that are educators know how kids will do that to keep their place as they're reading. And I watched them do that, and they'd read out loud. And I learned to read at an early age because I followed what they were doing. So I realized that I could overcome some of these limitations. Now, let's face it, we put limitations on children because it's for their own safety and their own health. There are reasons we put limitations on kids. I'm not saying that lifting all limitations is the way we always have to go. But I did learn from examples of my brothers limitations that were good. For example, I learned at the age of 4 or 5 years old that I did not want to cut my own hair because I saw the thrashing that John got when he cut Janie Beatty's hair down the street. And oh, did he do a good job on that. I learned that I could not fly. And I learned that from my brother Jim, who took the umbrella on the garage and tried. And when I saw his broken arm, I thought, well, I don't want that. So I learned some of these things by examples from them. My brothers, as they were young boys in Catholic church were wont to do, both became altar boys. And I was very proud of them. I'd watch as they'd walk up the middle aisle of the church with the priest, and they had on the black cassock and the white surplice and the vestments that the altar boys wore. And I was so proud. And I thought, that is so cool. They get to be up there and serve with the priest. And one Sunday, we all go back home, and I thought about it, and I want to do everything my brothers did. And I announced to my family with my grandmother there, I'm going to be an altar boy. And my grandmother looked at me. Now, I was a why kid. Time somebody told me no, I said why. And my grandmother said, you can't be an altar boy. And the first thing I said was why? And she thought for a second, and my grandmother was usually a very fast thinker, and she said, well, because the term is altar boy, and you're a girl, so you can't be an altar boy. Well, I didn't like that, but at least I could accept it, because somebody gave me a no with a logical response or some sort of evidence, proof why I couldn't do it. So I accepted that. Months later, my cousin Jack, who had been in seminary, became a Maryknoll missionary, a Catholic priest, and we all went when Jack said his first Mass. And in the Catholic Church, that's huge. The first Mass of the priest, that's a really big deal. And of course, John and Jim were the altar boys, and we were all there, and I'm being a good little girl sitting there. And we all gathered back at Jack's mom's house, my Aunt Jo, and that's mostly my Irish grandmother's family. And I watched, and Jack was so happy and so joyful. And I thought, I'm going to do that. And I announced to the family, and I was defiant. I put my hands on my hips and said, well, I'm going to be a priest like Jack. And the room just got silent. And my grandmother looks, and she shakes her head. And I wish I could do the accent well enough to tell you, but she said, you can't be a priest. And I looked at her, hands on hips, and said, why? Well, Grandma was really flabbergasted with that. She didn't have a good response right away, and she was trying to think, and I could see it. And she said to me, well, God says you can't be a priest. I'm 5 years old, and that didn't sit well, and I said, well, my God says I can. And my grandmother and the entire room had no idea how to reply to that. How do you tell a 5-year-old child that God says you can't do something, and then you're saying, well, my God says I can? So it was really, the whole room was just like in an uproar. They didn't know what to do. So little cliques of people resumed the conversations, and I was ushered outside to do play or whatever. I wish I had known enough about the Bible at that time to come up with this quote from my grandmother. Matthew 19, verse 26 says, "With God, all things are possible." I would love to have seen the look on her face if a 5-year-old came up with that quote when she says, "God says you can't." But I read this. I read this when I was in my high school. I went to Catholic school, and I was reading this, and I came up with that, and it resonated with me. And I wasn't sure where it was going to go at that point in time, but it resonated with me. And as most kids do when you're like 15, 16, 17 years old, I kind of drifted away from Catholicism. It wasn't speaking to me anymore, wasn't resonating with me, just couldn't abide by all the restrictions, the limitations that teaching was placing on me. So let's advance the clock about 50 years, literally. And I've gone on this spiritual journey. I was always a spiritual person, always knew that there was some higher power, there was something beyond me, far bigger than I, that was going to guide my life. Just didn't really know how I could define that or how I could feel that just yet. So 50 years later, Connie and I walked into a religious science church in Temecula, California. One of our friends had been church shopping and said, you got to go to this place. And she dragged me in there, literally. And I went in, and I sat down, and I thought, yeah, we'll see what they have to say. And the message was so clear and so succinct. And the message, I came out of there feeling good about myself. And I came out of there thinking, wow, my God really does say that I can. Because all of a sudden, my vision of who I was and who I could become and who I was becoming started to become a reality. And that started my spiritual journey. I went on, studied many things in that church, went on to become a practitioner of prayer and ultimately a minister. And along the way, I read this quote in The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of religious science. And for those of you that aren't familiar, that's now the Centers for Spiritual Living. Ernest Holmes wrote The Science of Mind, and he said, within us is the unborn possibility of limitless experience. Ours is the privilege of giving birth to it. Limitless experience. And then when you think about it, that last sentence I think was very intentional. Ours is the privilege of giving birth to it. Whether you're giving birth to a new idea with a project or a child, there's a level of effort, there's a level of joy, and sometimes there's a level of pain. Because you have to make it happen. You have to take that step forward. So when we're talking about my God says I can and removing limitation, what does that look like? What does that really look like for us? For me, it was to release those limitations that were placed on me by everyone else. I can do this. I can do that. I can become a priest. Can't be an altar boy, but I could become a priest. My grandmother wasn't thinking fast enough. She should have said, well, it's Father Jack, not Mother Jack. But she didn't get that far on that plane. But stepping into new thought, stepping into the belief system that there is a divine source that supplies everything that I need if I'm just open to it. And sometimes that opening up is what's so difficult because we feel by virtue of all those times we were told no, all those times we were told that's a bad idea, you can't. We buy into that and we don't think that we're worthy of receiving all the things that we're really here to receive. So we have to figure out those ways to release the limitations. Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist monk, said this: we have more possibilities available in each moment than we realize. In each and every moment there is possibility. We don't even recognize that. We don't even realize that in each moment there is a possibility of something more. And I firmly believe that each of those possibilities is something good. It's something that's always for our higher good. Sometimes the no's no to me, I've never liked that word. I don't like it now. No to me means not now, not yet, but not never. That's not something that I buy into. If I'm told, no, you can't do that, it's okay, not now. Maybe not yet. And there are times when we are faced with adversities in our life that will virtually bring us to our knees because of the intensity of it. I actually had a position where someone removed me from my supervisory job, and then because they thought that there was something going on, and it was proven there was nothing going on. And later on, she said, well, I'm still going to keep you down in this other job, but don't worry, you're not unsalvageable. That's the exact word she used. You're not unsalvageable. I wasn't about to let that moment define me, and I didn't. And I came back with a vengeance as a supervisor and moved up into the position within the firm. It was not something that was going to define me because that was her belief. It was not my belief. And our teaching, our belief in a higher power, a belief in this divine source, a belief in God is what keeps me going and saying, not now, not yet, but I'm coming back, always coming back. We have limitations in our life that are good. I think of God laws, man-made laws. And when I was preparing for this talk, the thing that came to mind as far as a God law that puts limitation, and there are some. Fifth, with the commandment, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Doesn't that put a limitation on my actions? Isn't that a good thing? It doesn't mean that I can't do it. I can, but I'm not going to. There are limitations in man-made laws. I can get on I-35 right now, and if I try and go 110 miles an hour, there's some nice little rectangular signs that the state of Texas puts out there that says, not a good idea. We want you to limit your speed to this. So there are laws that are out there. There are limitations that we have that are okay. They're good. And there's limitations we have that are semi-self-imposed. You know, as I've gotten older, and I'm in my 70s, I realize I can't run a mile. Used to be able to. 50 years ago, I could run a mile. I can't run a mile. But I'm not going to accept the I can't in that. I'm going to tweak it. I'm going to tweak it to my advantage. Maybe I can't run a mile, but I can walk a mile. Or maybe I can walk a half mile. Or maybe I can just do 3,000 steps today. I can release those limitations. I can release limitations of the challenges I have with technology. Anybody ever here challenged with technology ever? Yeah. I have an issue with my cell phone, and the first thing I do is look and go, well, Megan gets off at 3:30. You know, because Megan's my IT, anything that goes wrong. Or I'll look at the remote for the TV and go, I have no idea what that button does. So now I've realized it's time for me to explore a little bit more. And maybe IT is one area you want to go in. Maybe you don't want to delve into that at all. I had somebody tell me that they can't meditate. So, well, tell me more about that. Well, I can't meditate because I can't sit there for that long a period of time. I just can't sit still. I said, I get you. I understand. So do like I do. If I'm going on a long trip, I meditate while I'm driving. When I'm mowing my lawn, I meditate. When I'm sitting pulling weeds in the quiet in the yard, I meditate. Meditation doesn't have to be that, cross your legs and sit and go home for 30 minutes. Meditation is what you make it to be. So we have all these limitations, and we need to rise above them. Our very founder, Charles Fillmore, wrote this: imagination gives man the ability to project himself through space and time and rise above all limitations. That's our teaching. We can rise above all limitations. We just have to take the impetus to do so. And we have to be willing to admit what those limitations are. Admitting what they are is not as much to me as admitting that they exist and that I kind of put them there. Because I want to assign that responsibility to somebody else. Well, I didn't say I couldn't do it. My mother said I couldn't do it. Or I didn't say that was something that I came up with that idea. They said that was a bad idea. I mean, we always want that assignation to someone else. But it really is in ourselves. What's that old saying? Change your thinking, change your life. It happens all the time. We have powerful, powerful minds that we can do those things with. So this is what I'd like to invite you this week. Personal explorations. Explore what areas of your life seem limited and find ways to move beyond them. It doesn't have to be something grandiose. It could be something small. Everything we do, everything we suggest, should be on your own personal level. So somebody may come up with this brilliant idea to do something grandiose. I read an article the other day about a woman who just graduated with her master's degree at 101 years old. Now, I don't know what she plans on doing with it at 101 years old, and that isn't really the point to me. The point is probably somewhere along the line, somebody said, you really can't do that. And she says, but I can. So find something that you're finding as a limitation, and how can you move beyond that? Next, think about what you would like to try, but have been telling yourself you just can't do it. My brother sent my daughter a little thing when she graduated from high school, and it had the quote on it, "What would you attempt to try if you knew you couldn't fail?" What would you attempt to try if you knew you couldn't fail? So think about that. This week, explore that. What is it in your life you haven't tried yet, but you'd really like to do that? And give it a try. And the last is to dream big this week. And when I say big, again, it doesn't have to be on a massive scale. It can be just a little tiny thing. Maybe you've been struggling with mobility, or maybe you've been struggling with finances or whatever, and say, okay, I'm going to try this week. I'm just going to try one little thing and see how it feels. And don't listen to any of the monkey minds, internally or externally, that tell you, you can't, you won't, no, bad idea. Let you be the one that's in control of that. And when you do that, I strongly recommend that you tell yourself and recite this to yourself throughout the week. My God says I can. Thank you.